Now that we've learned a little bit about the supply and the demand for workers, the wages that are set, the quantity of workers that's determined, we're going to look at a market that is perfectly competitive. So what we've done in the past is we've done this in the product market. What you should have learned in the past is in the context of the product market. So we're going to spend a little bit of time reviewing what it looks like in the product market. So make sure that you understand that this is not labor market right now or factor market, but this is going to be a review of the product market. So what we've done is learned that this is the supply of goods, this is the demand of goods in the perfectly competitive product market. So let's say this is the market for gold. So this is the gold market. And all gold is exactly the same. Doesn't matter who's supplying. The gold is set by the world market for gold. And so this is going to be the price of gold, and this is going to be the equilibrium quantity of gold. And this is the entire market. This is the market. And then what we look at is that, well, there might be a firm itself that is producing gold. And so what happens? So if I am over here, this is the individual, well, what price can they get for gold? Well, they get the market price. So remember, they're what we call price takers. They take the price, and that's their demand for their gold. This is, and we derived this before, but this is the Mr. DARP line. So this is marginal revenue, demand, average revenue, and price. And then we said, well, they have a marginal cost of production, and that marginal cost goes up as they produce more. And then this is their profit maximizing quantity right there. And we analyze this by looking at it and saying, okay, if their marginal revenue is here and their marginal cost is down here, then that one is worth it. So yes, they should produce the first one. Marginal revenue, marginal cost, marginal revenue, marginal cost, marginal revenue, marginal cost, marginal revenue, marginal cost. So that's profit maximizing. They shouldn't go beyond that, because then the extra cost for the next one is up here, and the extra revenue for the next one is down here, so it's not worth it. And we could put the average total cost on there and everything, but that's just to kind of show you what you should have learned about the product market and perfect competition. So now what we're going to look at is the factor market, or the labor market, in a perfectly competitive market. In other words, it's the perfectly competitive market for hiring workers. And so what that means is, just like we said in the product market, is that all the goods are exactly the same and you get the same price for each one of those. We're going to transfer a lot of those exact same concepts, a lot of these concepts, over to the labor market. So what we've done in a previous video is we've set up our market just like this. So we have what we'll call the labor market. And like we've learned already, is that we have a wage and a quantity of workers, we have a supply of workers, and a demand for those workers. Remember, this is the supply is the individuals, and the demand are the firms. And then this sets the wage for workers. This is the equilibrium wage, and this is the equilibrium quantity of workers. And now, what we're going to show is that this can be connected. Let me make it a little bit smaller. I want to show the product market as well. We'll pull that back over. What I want to show is that, what about the individual firm that's hiring workers? So what about the firm over here? Well, we've got all sorts of businesses hiring people, and we know that the supply of workers, this is going to be the supply of workers, the wage that they get paid, the wage is set by the market. So they're wage takers. Remember, they can't say, oh, I want to work at a higher wage. No, the wage is already set by the market. And so for the firm, they pay that going wage. They pay this wage right here that was set right here by the market. And so this becomes the supply curve for workers for the firm. They want to hire one worker, they can hire that one worker, they pay them the wage. They want to hire a second worker, they can hire that worker at the same wage. They want to hire a third worker, they can hire that third worker at the same wage, and fourth and fifth and continuing on. So there's this perfectly elastic supply curve for workers. Now to finish this video up, we're going to add just one more concept. So first, let's make sure that we compare this to what we were looking at before, which is this. Really, what's the same? Well, we have things that are the same. We have this market, which determines supply and demand, and then the price and quantity of the good. This is the good, the product. Firms take that price, and then they have a demand curve over here at that price. They're price takers. So when they sell their good, the demand for the firm's good is perfectly elastic. They have to take that price, and they can sell as many goods as they want. The demand for their good is the same no matter what the quantity is. So if we take that over here and we look at the labor market, we have very similar ideas. And so we have on this side, we have a market with a supply and demand for workers. The wage is determined by the market, and the quantity of workers in the entire market is already determined. Then the wage is taken by these firms, and there will be a perfectly elastic supply curve of workers at that wage. And so they're wage takers. They take that wage, and they if they want to hire a worker, they can pay them that wage, second worker that wage, third worker that wage, and they can hire as many workers as they want at that wage right there. So then the question is, how do they know how many workers? So how many workers are they going to hire? And that's a question that we're not going to answer in this video. But the last thing that I wanted to show you is what, besides the supply curve, do we call this curve right here? Because this is going to be a very important one for us. And this is going to be kind of what we've called before, which in the past we've called it a marginal cost curve. This time we're going to call it the marginal factor cost. All right, so remember it's a factor of production. So it's the marginal cost for this factor of production. So why does this firm have a marginal factor cost? Well, let's try to break it down into the details that we have right here. So let's say this wage, let's just pick an easy wage. Let's call this wage $10. So the wage that was set by the market is $10. So if this firm, let's say this is the quantity of labor, and then this is the wage that they pay, and then let's move this over just a little bit. Let's say that this is the total cost, and then we'll call this the marginal factor cost. Okay, so let's use a couple of really simple examples to show what marginal factor cost is. Okay, so if they hire 0 workers and they pay them a wage of $10, their total cost is 0 and there's no marginal factor cost. So let's say they hire the first worker. Remember, how much did they hire the first worker for? $10. Let's say this is the only thing that is their total cost, so then their total cost is 10. So the marginal factor cost is how much did that factor of production increase their cost by? Well, that factor of production, this factor of production, increased their cost from 0 to 10, so that one was 10. Correct? All right, so if we look at the second one, we hire a second worker. We pay him a wage of 10. our total cost went up to now 20. We have 2 workers at $10 each. So the marginal factor cost goes from 10 to 20, so it is 10. And if I do one more example with it, you can kind of see what we're talking about here. If we decide to hire a 3rd worker, we can pay that worker $10. Our total cost goes up to 30, and our marginal factor cost is from 20 to 30, so it's 10. So notice how the wage and the marginal factor cost are equal to each other. So this supply curve is supply equals marginal factor cost. I'm sorry, I wrote that incorrectly. Supply equals marginal factor cost. So just like we had Mr. DARP, marginal revenue equals the demand curve, right? So that is price is the same as the marginal revenue. Because if I want to sell one more, I can sell it at $10, so my total revenue goes up by 10. If I want to sell one more, I can sell for $10, my total revenue goes up by 10. So that concept from perfectly competitive product market is the same idea as what we're getting right here with the wage, which is the price of the worker, equals the marginal factor cost, which is the extra cost that the firm has to pay to get one more worker. They're the same. So supply equals the marginal factor cost. So I'm going to zoom back out one more time and look again at the similarities between these two. So one more time, you have a supply and demand curve, right? You have your supply curve and your demand curve, equilibrium wage set in the market with the quantity set in the market, and then their wage takers. And this is their supply curve, which is the wage and the quantity of worker, which is going to be the same as the marginal factor cost. If we go back over to the product market, you're going to have similar things. Supply and demand for the product. You have the firm being a price taker. The price of the product is going to be equal to the marginal revenue, which is the extra revenue that the firm gets. Okay, so lots of similarities between these two when it comes to product market and factor market and perfect competition.